Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any grand law statements or positions. Make sure you keep the conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, we love seeing you live every Thursday night. It's Thursday. Yeah, it's still Thursday on Facebook and YouTube land. The chat's always fun. Happy birthday, Joe. They're already coming in on the chat. But we can't get to every chat. And remember, it might show up on the show. And if you can't catch us live, catch us in the replay or in your favorite podcasting app. You know me, John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, Jason Richards. Hello and good evening.
You shouldn't have to read from a script to get it right.
I know. But
we've been doing this for 11 damn years.
You think maybe by the 506th episode, I'll get it.
I don't need to read off a script to let you know that I'm past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia. Also glad to be here.
I was going to say glad to have you, but we'll see. Joe Martinez, how are you?
I'm not going to pick on you tonight because Jason is doing a good job of that.
Bring it on.
I usually talk about your mini strokes while you're reading. We're not going to do that tonight. Joe Martinez. Yes, thank you. Let's see, past and current master of Manassas Lodge number 182.
Life master in perpetuity.
Absolutely not. Nope, not happening. Joe Martinez.
4 more years.
Member of Things and Stuff and all that good stuff. And happy to be here.
4 more years.
No term limits for Joe Martinez.
That's not what the Constitution says.
Okay, well.
They're going to make him do this until he's 90.
4 more years. All right, let's talk about the patrons who support the show.
Yeah, let's talk about the patrons.
505 episodes.
The patrons want you to do it.
Have been brought to you by our wonderful patrons. You guys are amazing. You rock our socks. Head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable. Didn't even have to read a script from that one. All right, good.
Great, you did great, John. Super proud of you, buddy.
Even the stop clock is right twice a day.
My mom says I'm special. Next up, we have everyone's favorite part of the show, including Joe.
Tarot card of the week.
Love it. Yes. So this week, since it's my birthday, I called dibs, and we'll be doing, as I'm shuffling here, I think we've done it before.
The Into the Void Cat Tarot.
No cats.
No.
Yes. We're doing the DC Comics Tarot deck.
Since when did you like comic books?
It's a recent thing. Post midlife crisis. No, probably since I was 9. So have liked them a little bit. Yes. So we're shuffling here, and I dropped the card.
On the topic of is Masonry on life support, our card of the week is.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
You need a script, Joe?
No. Okay. Man, look. Shablam. What do we got?
Boom.
The sun.
The sun. Superman. The sun. Superman. Okay. I like it. Okay. What is that? What does that bode for Masonry?
Shiny, happy people all around.
Lots of lapel pins.
Good news.
Is that what? No, those are flowers.
Radiance.
Lapel pins.
Radiance. Yeah. Youthful energy. No.
Could use some of that.
Yeah. You always got the naked baby on the horse and the rider weight system.
Yep. Well, here we have Superman.
Maybe Joe needs to flip it upside down.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you at the end of the show if it needs to be reversed or not.
Reversed. Yes. We will tell the card what it is.
Optimistic. We'll go with that.
We always start the show optimistic, but I think with this topic, will not end optimistically.
That's
it might.
Right.
We never know. We'll still be
That's
here.
Right. Because Jason and Joe have not seen the new numbers I've crunched, so we'll get into some exciting updates coming soon. All right. Yes. Let's turn off that banner. Let's get to tonight's topic then. All right. Okay, so where we left off in a land far away. Oh, before we do, congratulations to my dad for getting raised.
That's right.
Yay!
Congratulations. Yeah.
That's right. That was exciting news. That's why we didn't have a show last week. He, the Grand Master of Masons in Maryland, happened to schedule it on a Thursday night, so we took one for the team, and fantastic time. There were two candidates, my dad and another person who he got his EA degree with, and I thought it was just gonna be a few guys. No, the entire Grand Line of Masons in Virginia showed up, did a fantastic degree.
Maryland.
What did I say? Virginia? Oh, fail.
Yeah.
Epic fail.
Mm.
It was rolled off the tongue. Yes. The entire Grand Line showed up and did a great job. It was a great degree. Everything went smooth as butter. Yeah, just really well done with solemnity and pride. I don't know. It was a beautiful night. Jason, thank you for coming out and attending that as well.
Congrats to Brother Dad.
Brother
Dad.
So kind of weird.
Amazing.
Get your Louis Juliet.
I need to get one that's like upside down. Get the old reverse Lewis. Fun fact, the other candidate was raised by his dad. So we had a reverse Lewis and a Lewis on the same night. So I guess they cancel out. It's just a null degree. I don't know.
I don't know what you're saying, but stick to the script. Buddy.
It's math. Sorry. All right.
Let's talk about math.
Let's talk about math. All right.
No,
so
don't stick to the script. He forgets how to read.
No.
what? All right. So I got a little bug in my butt to update the membership statistics because I believe there was a recent, was it Midnight Freemasons article, or was it the Meet Act and Part article?
It was Meet Act and Part.
Meet Act and Part, right? The new spin-off blog. Probably Brother St. Crier cited my work in looking at memberships.
Mark St.
Mark St. Cyr.
Town
Crier.
Crier.
Well,
know what
Yes.
you said.
Sorry, I need a script. Used some of my data about hashtag 2040, right, which we've talked about quite a bit on the show. As a wake up call, you know, it was cautiously optimistic, but you know, basically said, hey, look, we're doing this to ourselves. And so I thought, you know, yeah, like, brethren, prove me wrong. Let's try to see if we're going to get any better on this. So I thought, for the purpose of this week, I went back to the spreadsheet, pulled up some new data, and in, you know, about 1 week's worth of time or fewer, I was able to actually get some updated numbers that we can talk about tonight.
fewer weeks than one. 0
Yes.
weeks.
Yes, partial, 0.6 weeks. Let's first off, what do you think the over/under is? Because you haven't seen it, I'm gonna throw it out to you guys to see, and
So-
maybe in the chat. Let's hit the chat too. What do you think the over/under is? We have the baseline at 2040. I've crunched some new numbers.
Okay.
Is it over, under, or the same?
No change.
I say so. What you mean under Freemason?
So earlier than 2040,
Under
still
is
at
early.
2040, or past 2040?
I'm going to be Johnny Optimism and say past 2040.
Okay, living a little bit longer. Hence, is Masonry on life support?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, let's start at the beginning. I have a few people. Some people say it's over. It might be later. We'll see. First thing I want to do is start at the beginning. Where did all this stuff come from? Where did 2040 come from? It's a good place to start at the beginning. Let me share my screen and talk about the presentation that I put together back in 2017. Okay, dusted off the old copy of this. I think this was presented publicly for the first time at our 2017 TMR 300 event.
Or was it the PA Academy of Masonic Knowledge?
They were similar, so whichever one came first, but they were similar presentations. I took, you know, the probably about 10 or 20 slides from the same thing and had a different spin on it. But here,
PA Academy was March 2016.
well, okay, then there you go. That was the first time it was revealed to the world. The membership forecast is a chart here that, let's see if I can blow this up. Does that work? Yeah, that works. That plots out the data as reported by the Masonic Services Association of North America, or MSANA, and plots them out over time. The earliest data that this organization, created by the Committee of Grand Masters of North America, started out kind of as a general relief fund, but also over time said, hey, well, since we're all together, let's start exchanging numbers. Let's start figuring out, like, what is our count? How many Masons are there in the mainstream Blue Lodge Freemasonry in the United States? So these numbers, there's a ton of data I could go into about how these numbers are flawed. They're self-reported. It depends on the Grand Secretary, depends if they did it that year, but let's just go. This is the best we've got for membership statistics. Starting in 1924, you see we were over 3 million Masons. We dipped down into our lowest peak around 1942. Then post World War had a membership boom, peaking in 1959 with over 4.1 million Masons.
Or we started counting Masons that weren't previously counted.
Or they were dual members, or yes, lots of things that we could say about this. But this is what we have. That is the highest we have ever been. It's 1959. And one thing that I noticed when plotting this out over time is that from 1959 down to, at the time, 2016 numbers, this is the latest information posted on the MSANA website, were the grand totals across the 51 jurisdictions up to the year 2016. Well, if you look at 1959 to 2016 numbers, this blue line looks pretty straight. The slope of this line, for our math nerds, seems to not be changing a whole lot. So, well, can we forecast? Because nothing's changed since 1959. That this slope remains relatively straight. What if we were to project that out and forecast that out and see where that line hits to zero? Where does that line hit zero? So plotted it in Excel, threw some forecasting functions at it, very high rigor, and you get this little branching cone of uncertainty here, where the yellow line is kind of the predicted, the green line is optimistic, red line is pessimistic. But what I was interested in most is, where did the line intersect at zero? Jason.
I want to see how we're going to get negative Freemasons. Like, how do we get negative 1 million Freemasons?
We are going to work hard. You haven't been to a division leadership conference, have you? That's how we get them. Ooh, burn. So, yes, obviously it's just a plot, it's a forecast.
I've heard of one-day classes, one-day expulsions.
Expel them all.
You know what? It might be a thing where we have that blue lightning or that one-day class, and at the end you fill out a survey on how it went, and they'll give you your money back if you didn't like it. So enough of those people do that, we will get into the negative numbers.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that line right there, that red line, intersects at, or the yellow line intersects at the red vertical in the year 2040.
I've demitted 20 times just this month.
Nice. So that's where we left off. That's where I've shared this with multiple, presentations, committees, Grand Lodge members, and the like. And is what it is. Like, I don't want that to happen, but it's basic math. If you are driving your car at so many miles per hour and there's a brick wall so many miles in front of you, and you do not change the steering wheel or change your acceleration, we know when you're going to hit the brick wall. And so that's what I'm trying to avoid. Hey guys, the brick wall is exactly over here, and this is what we need to do to fix that. Any questions so far? Yes.
Dr. Rourke. So, that definitely looks like the one you did in PA, because I was there for the one you did in at the GW Memorial, and it was more, you went over more of the survey. It's like the questions you asked
that
on
is
the
true.
survey stuff. So then my next question is, are you really reporting on 2016 data, or because 2016 data wouldn't have existed back then? So your latest data probably was 2014 or 2015, right?
It was either 15 or 16. I didn't have time to go back and look at where I actually pulled it, but it was 15 at the earliest. May have been 16 as well. So good question. And again, this is all self-reported data. MSANA, they usually have about a 1-year lag, and that's to be expected, right? Different Grand Lodges meet throughout the year. Their numbers come in, they kind of trickle in, and so you really can only count it when the very last Grand Lodge reports, right? So there's going to be this probably at least a year delay before you get some rough head count.
So, which leads me to my next question. Are we going to know we're at 0 in 2040, or we're not going to know till 2041 or 2042?
That's a good question, right? And so we'll talk about that, because I'm going to talk about like the slope itself, right? This is how many men are we losing per year, because that's really where the rubber hits the road. We can kind of forecast how many people are leaving. So if last one out, close the door and turn the lights off. So Jimmy asks, where is the Grand Lodge reporting these numbers to? Well, I'm glad you asked. At the MSANA website, which I'll bring up here, they have...
It stands for what?
The Masonic Service Association
Of North America.
of North America. MSANA.com. And what they have lots of really good things. It's a pretty cool summary of, again, an effort across all Grand Lodges and Grand Masters to try to organize some charities. So this is where like relief things come out. If a Grand Lodge has a hurricane happen in their state, this is where they kind of do an appeal for other jurisdictions to help chime in, help distressed brother Master Masons. Also, this is where your short talk bulletins come from, right? So you've heard of these guys, even if you haven't explicitly dealt with them. But every year at msana.com, somewhere on their website, they will post jurisdictional Masonic membership statistics. There's a whole diatribe I could go on how inconsistent and how it was at one point on a server underneath someone's desk, like literally someone's desktop. That's all that the official copy was saved in. The good news is we have the Wayback Machine, so thanks to archive.org, we can go reach back to previous years. Because, let's look at this is live. We have updated numbers by jurisdiction that go from 2018 to 2023. If this is your first time at the rodeo, you're like going to say, where are all the numbers previous to 2018? Not easily found on this website. Yes, I'm shocked, Jimmy. A Masonic website that isn't up to date. So what they do is every year they take the numbers as reported, usually by the Grand Secretaries, up to how many Masons in good standing, are in their organization. Depending on the jurisdiction, sometimes they double count plural members, sometimes they don't count demits. It's the best, again, that we have. This year, the MSANA have posted up to the year 2023, and then did a nice little chart here telling us the gains and losses over the past 15 years by state. They're only showing you, 6 years of data, but they're telling you over the past 15 years, this is what that state has gained or lost. Spoiler alert, no one has gained any members.
Doesn't Hawaii normally have like a plus every year?
Let's go look at Hawaii.
Colorado did for a while.
Hawaii is barely losing members at 520.
Hawaii has barely any members.
Yes. So percentage-wise, that's a huge hit. Absolutely.
They lost a quarter of their membership in 1 year.
But, who's counting? So, as I mentioned a few years ago, we are already at less than 1 million Masons across the United States. Again, mainstream Masonry. I don't know if even adding the Prince Hall numbers in now would even bring us to 1 million. It's where we're kind of on that trajectory now.
Well, that's a great. I was going to ask you that before. Did you, when you started putting all this together years and years ago, did you try to get numbers from Prince Hall? And is there
a great question? Yes. So I did try to go to the best source that I had, which was the George Washington National Masonic Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia, where they actually have copies of most of these jurisdictions and many of the Prince Hall jurisdictions grand annual assessments, right? Or the printed copy of what was said and done from each Grand Lodge. Even then, their archives were sparse. So I believe I was looking at the data recently, and back then I probably had maybe 10 jurisdictions. And across the different years, it was very sparse. So I really didn't have any consistent data to draw any conclusions from. But it was very tough. Record keeping is a challenge across Prince Hall Masonry. All right, so if we left off my data last time at 2016, then we have 2018 to 2023. I didn't go state by state. I just pulled the grand totals down here at the bottom, and then used the Wayback Machine to figure out what I think the missing year 2017 gave me. So let's go see it. Let me stop sharing my screen to make sure I didn't want to spoil that. Oh man, that would have been a big spoiler. Let's go back here, share this again, and now we'll show you the updated version of my spreadsheet. The updated version takes us to where we left off last time. So this is almost identical to the chart you just saw, minus the forecasting. So this is just the actual data. As of 2016, the total was 1.1 million Masons across the United States. All right, so I went and updated the information with numbers up to 2023. And what we want to see is does the slope continue out? Does it bend upwards? Does it bend downwards? Let's see what happens. So out to 2023, kind of looks the same. So again, we're really looking just from this period all the way down. Unfortunately, it almost has the same slope.
Ah!
Unfortunately.
It looks like it's plateauing there a little.
It's different. At the macro level, it looks the same. But yes, but for the astute, observing Mason, there's little ups and downs there. So it's not perfectly straight and worth investigating. Joe.
Yeah, so let's go back to the MSANA tab, if you still have it there. So it looks like the numbers are identical in many jurisdictions over the last 2 years. So my question was going to be, did they just not get reported, so they use the same numbers, or what? Like Wyoming, and if you go up to Washington, if you keep scrolling out, there's tons of duplicates across many of those years. So could that be the reason why there's a plateau in those last 2 years?
Absolutely. Yep. So why would
South Dakota, same thing.
Yeah, why would they do that? What do you think? What do you think your rationale is there?
Didn't get those numbers yet and just used the previous year's number.
Exactly.
There's no real reason why they would be identical.
Right.
So many places.
Mm-hmm. It's highly improbable that would be.
So the numbers would probably skew. If they're following the previous 4 or 5 years, they would probably be lower.
They would probably be worse. That's correct. The 2023 numbers should be worse than what is published.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Great catch. Right. So even though it looks like there may be a little uptick here, or at least a flattening out of this line, you're right. It actually, in reality, might be lower. These are all things you need to consider when you're doing this type of data analysis. How clean is the data, right? Who's reporting it? You never want self-reported data, because if you ask me how cool I am, I'm 6'5" and I weigh, a slim 170, right? But we all know self-reported data has its biases as well.
Jimmy has a question that I can't bring up anymore. Yep.
So what is the actual yearly percentage in decline year over year? Man, Jimmy, you're a great straight man. You are actually hitting the flow of the conversation as we go. So I'll get to that because I wanted to go back to my previous method and just dump it in Excel, say, forecast this out and tell me when it gets to 0. I ran it in Excel with mixed results. And I said, well, let me just keep this into Google and see if the Google Sheets gives me similar or different results. And so the Google forecast actually has a weird bump down in membership in 2024. So it either knew that 2023 was an anomaly, right, and tried to rectify this little bump here, and just say, well, we're just going to keep on going, and it forecasts it out from there. We can see that according to Google, again, this is all very back of the napkin forecasting. Google's forecast brings us down to an intersection point of 2035. So
I need you to explain that big dip in 2023-24, because
right,
even because the previous years, if you did the math, you probably got to that.
Yep.
What have we been saying? About 2.5. For every 2.5 that we lose, we gain 1, right? Or almost 3.
Right.
So,
yep.
Yeah, that
you pretty much lose 3 for every 1. Yep, coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that concerned me when I saw that. I said, that doesn't look right. Joe?
Well, I was just gonna say, is Google Sheets, is it accounting for just a large string of deaths that nobody knows about that happened in 2023 that we've been oblivious to?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, no, it wouldn't be. It'd be terrible, but
Google knows everything anyway, but
all right.
but it's totally sus. Yeah, so to that point, I found this data to be sus, and so that forecast, while straight after 2024, it's pretty much a linear slope here. Yeah, I don't like this drop that it gave me. So I said, okay, how can I rectify that? How can I get a better estimate of how much we're losing? Plus, by the way that I did the forecast is that I actually said forecast this entire thing to include all the way back to 1924, which has irregularities, right? So there's a little bit of signal to this, or a little bit of noise to the signal, that even though it hasn't really changed much since 1959, it's probably taken that into consideration and throwing some little, jaggedy edges over here on the tail end. So again, let's clean that up. My next step was to start in 1959. I'm going to start at the peak. I'm starting at the top of the hill and not really considering any of this fluctuation previous to 1959. And then I'm going to just forecast from there. So now what you see, if I look at this next chart, starting in 1959 to present, to our 2023 data, and I threw on just a linear trend line on top of that. Let's see if that, we're not going to forecast, we're just going to throw a trend line over top of this data, hope the R-squared works out, and just see where it lands, right? No math magic happening. Following the trend line, we're still back in 2035. That's just a straight line applied to the data set. Okay. So we got some weird information that's pointing us in a 2035 direction, which is scary, right? Because that means it's
10 years.
We're actually going to be not really solvent a lot earlier than that, right? At least another 5 years from the first prediction.
Well, I mean, you said something. So you said the word solvent, and I think that's where we need to probably break the conversation a little bit, right?
Yes.
Because
I know what you're thinking.
this is just all we're looking at is the mathematics around membership trends, right?
Mhm.
This has nothing to do
Reported membership trends.
Reported
Right,
membership trends.
right. But this is nothing that we're talking about is taking into account financial stability of Grand Lodges,
Right.
increases in dues, that kind of thing. So all we're talking about is just bodies and seats, right?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Continue.
Exactly. All right, so that's where we are with a different view. And again, to keep the data clean, I'm going to still look 1959 onward. Okay. Let's try something different. If we know that data that Google is going to give us this weird little bump here, why don't I go back and answer the question that Jimmy came up with earlier? What's the actual yearly percentage in decline year over year? Why don't I just take that number and add it up? Because I wanted to start with 1959. Yeah, where's the Da Vinci Code bump? Let's see. Yep, when did Joe join? Right, that's right.
I was literally part of the Da Vinci Code bump.
There you go. All right, so let's see. What I wanted to do next was figure out what the average slope is. So there's fluctuations year after year, but from 1959 till now, let's do this big long stretch here. Let's find out what the average loss is per year. Because there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, there's going to be one-day conferrals, there's going to be COVID. There's going to be fluctuations, but let's just average out those years and see what that gives us. So I did. The average slope loss since 1959 is roughly 51,000 members per year. Year after year after year, we're losing across the United States 51,000 Masons. That could be through expulsions, demitting, leaving, dying, all the reasons that you can imagine. But net, we are losing 51,000 members. So let's take that slope and assume that average slope continues. Huge assumption. But let's assume that average slope of losing 51,000 members per year will start at the 2023 numbers that we've got. Ignore the little crook downward here, but let's just start at 2023 and say, let's go forward. 2024 is going to be this number minus 51K. And the next one, 2025, is going to be 2024 numbers minus 51K. Plot that straight out.
So you're looking at like 2046?
2040. It's like, daggone it. So, interesting. So, if we assume that, as it has been for decades and decades, that we have this relatively flat slope, and we assume that to be 51,000 members per year loss, then basic math says we've only got the same number of years left, and we're back at hashtag 2040. Okay. Thoughts, opinions, because then I have one last chart to kind of talk about, but I wanted to kind of see what your reactions were so far.
Well, I'm not surprised by anything, and I mean, again, but I mention it again because I am the optimistic person, and I'm seeing some questions that are in the comments. Love Jimmy. He's like a bright little beacon of sunshine. We are, and I think who said it? Jose. Yeah, Jose said it before. We're not talking about the influence that things are having on the changes in Freemasonry. Yeah, Brother Jose says it great. This trend line is just talking about reported statistics, and exactly to your point, using that simple math of minus 50,000 per year to get us to that number, right? And we're not talking about this isn't addressing the cultural changes that are going to have to happen way before 2040. Like Like the culture change doesn't happen at 2040. It's going to happen years before, you know.
Will it?
Well, so, you know, all we've been talking about, it has to, right? Because
It's a legitimate question by me. I'm not being snarky.
No, and here's a legitimate answer is we are being very myopic here looking at the United States, right?
Yes.
There are many other continents where Freemasonry is happening, and it's actually growing, right? So it's not declining, it is growing. You look at different countries in South America, in the last 10, 15 years, Freemasonry has exploded. And they're not having one-day conferrals, and they're not, you know, having blue lightnings, and they're not, you know, hey, join today and be a Shriner tomorrow. They're not having any of that weird marketing that we do here in the States. They're growing because their value proposition is important to the people that live in those countries. Look at the UGLE. They were on the same trend for a very long time. They're the largest single jurisdiction in the world, right? If you look at them as a country, you know, I think at their peak in the 1959, 1960, they were at 500,000 members just in that one jurisdiction alone. And they have sloped similarly, but in the last 5 years, the decline has decreased. You know what I mean? So, but they, for the last 10, 15, 20 years, have already embraced culture change. Smaller lodges. If they have too many people in a lodge, split off and start a new lodge. So those cultural things have happened everywhere else except the United States. So that's what I mean. It's like I love John's data, but it's for a small sliver of Masonry, right? Which is the one we know about because we live here in the United States. But Freemasonry is different in many other places.
Sure.
This trend line is not going to account for that.
Sure. At one point, I heard a statistic that said there was roughly about 5 million Masons globally in mainstream Masonry. I would love to see where that number came from, right? And is that based on our peak? Because we had 4.1 here in the United States alone. When did that 5 number come from? Total around the world. So again, there's a lot of things that one thing that also comes into this, which a few brothers in the chat have brought up too, is the Simpsons paradox, which says that basically you can't tell which, at the macro level, what jurisdictions are growing, shrinking until you peel back the onion and you actually look at their data as well. Because we could all be going down, but this one state's doing amazing and like crushing it. But because it's blended in, it's normalized with the other jurisdictions, you can't tell. And it could be crushing it and like doubling members every year. Spoiler alert, there's none that are doing that. But the data, without looking into it, it could be so normalized that you couldn't find what's working and fix the macro, right, without looking at the micro. Yep. Good point. The last thing that I wanted to look at, I said, okay, while this looks like a relatively straight line from 1959 till now, if I wanted to close one eye, tilt my head, I could say, it might be letting up a little bit here in the recent past. So what if I took an arbitrary number and looked at like the past 10 years? What would the average slope be just for the past 10 years? The past decade, is it still negative 51,000 members, or is it something a little bit more optimistic? All right, let's not look at the whole. Let's just look at the part, the most recent last part, and see, can we forecast off of that? So I did. The optimistic slope gives us a projection since 2013, looking back at 2013 numbers. We're actually not losing 51,000. We're only, sadly, losing 39,000 members per year on average for the past 10 years worth of data. So that gives us a little softer landing of this airplane, right? It's not going nose down. We've got a little bit more of a glide path, right? If we want to assume those optimistic projections are true, recalculating that from 2024 out puts us in the year
2045.
We will be negative in 2045. We'll still have members in 2044.
And I'll still be master.
Buys us 4 years.
It buys us only 4 years. So optimistically,
Man, that's like projecting out Social Security solvency.
if everyone just takes 70% of their dues, no, this is crazy. Optimistically, we're only buying ourselves four more years. So 4 more years, a new slogan for Joe.
So, yeah, like I said, I'm a big believer in the maths, as they say abroad. I just don't know. I feel like it's going to be more of a plateau than a slope.
Sure.
Honestly.
Which that brings up, the last part, which is this is just back of the napkin forecasts. This doesn't take into account all the different things that we're trying, the Not a Man of Mason campaign, all these other campaigns that are going on to think about how do we turn that number around. Again, it's not all about
all the campaigns
numbers
that have had what impact.
Well, for the past 10 years, they've only lost 40,000 members per year. I know, exactly. Yep.
Past performance is not indicative of future performance. I get it.
But you bring up a good
Masonry
point.
still largely has
Masonry's not an S&P 500 stock package. It's like I said, I think numbers wise, everything that we're saying tonight makes absolute sense.
You're right.
I just think that, and we've said this before, I just think honestly, these numbers don't scare me. You know what I mean? Because I'm coming on 20 years as a Mason this year, and I've already seen the want for culture change. You know what I mean? So, and we've said this many times. There's not going to be this poster child for, Jason's not going to be the poster child for change in Masonry in the U.S. across the world. It's going to happen because it has to happen, right? Because the people that are left are going to be the only ones that can change it, so they will change it because there's no other recourse. So there will be a culture change. Will Freemasonry ever look like it did in the 1950s and 60s again? Absolutely not. But the rhetorical question is, do we want it to?
Right. And it brings up, from a leadership perspective, some hard questions, hard decisions about what do we want it to be? How are we going to manage these assets? They're going to collapse, right? There's just a ton of questions that, as we get closer to 2040 or even 2044, whatever that number is. See,
I don't agree there, John, and maybe because I'm just older and wiser now, and in years, and I'm just picking a fight with you. No, honestly, you said that the L word, and it irked me a little bit because there is with very few exceptions, there are no jurisdictions that are future thinking. You know what I mean? Everything is year to year. This is my year. This is what we're going to do this year. Nobody gives a shit about next year or the next 5 years. You really don't.
Incentives matter. Yeah.
There are some exceptions. Like I remember we had Most Worshipful Mike Stoops on, right? And he talked about, and I was blown away by that. He talked about like a 10-year plan that everybody, I'm like, strategic planning. That sounds amazing. Oh my God, businesses have been doing it for 120 years. This is wonderful, right? I just don't think, just from what I've seen and our experiences in Masonry, I've not seen the leadership of Masonry actually that forward thinking.
Could you imagine knowing that it's 2025 as we're recording this, and 2040 is still roughly the target that we're all aiming for, unfortunately. Could you imagine if a Grand Lodge said, we need a 15-year plan?
No one is gonna pull that trigger. No one's pulling that trigger.
Okay, never mind then.
No way.
Great idea. But won't happen.
Nope. And it's not me being Debbie Downer.
No, not at all.
We're just looking at past experience while Jason has disappeared, to the way that leadership is designed in Masonry does not set itself up for long-term wins. It just doesn't. You know what I mean? It's like you have this group of people that are here for a year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever, and then they're gone. They're gone. They're retired. They're sitting on the sidelines. They're not doing anything anymore. Mm-hmm. So who's so it's a big game of just kicking the can down the road. And unfortunately, the road stopped getting built in 2040.
Yeah.
The road is kind of
A
a
ravine.
hill, ravine, if you will. Yes.
Nice. All right. So the question is, do we update the projections to 2044? That's an optimistic view.
It doesn't flow off the tongue like 2040 does.
2040.
So, well,
Right.
John, you had optimistic projections back 10 years ago.
I did. Hmm.
And what was the optimistic number 10 years ago?
Well, it actually Excel at the time actually would do it where it actually turned up. It actually went up. I played a little bit with the percentage of confidence, like this cone. So if you basically said 100% confident, it's going to be between 0 and 1 million, or 0 and 2 million, right? So we know we're going to land in there. But if you bring down your confidence window, you could say, I'm maybe 5% certain we're going to hit somewhere in here, but 95%, I could be 95% wrong, right? So that's the cone of uncertainty you need to think about. Yeah, that was the.
So what you're saying is you presented flawed data.
On purpose, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, John.
Right. But right, but like this is, I mean, from a statistical standpoint, like if you're a betting man, like where do you want to put your bet? And that's where you widen or narrow that cone of uncertainty here on the out years.
2040, it'll be a cone of shame.
It will be a. Touche.
I'm going to get so much hate mail after this episode.
Just ignore it for 15 years.
It'll work itself out.
It'll work itself out.
Yeah. What can we do in the next 5 years? What can we do in the next 10 or next 15 years? That's really what we really have to consider. So there it is, gents. The data doesn't look much better. I was able to add at least 8 more years of trend lines to this, and the results are pretty much the same. And again, best case scenario, we've bought ourselves 3 or 4 more years. So let's keep sticking with 2040, if for no other reason, like Joe said, it makes a good bumper sticker, but also gives us a goal, not to be ignored, but to actually take action and do something about it.
Okay.
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 You'll still be master. It won't matter anyway, Joe.
I probably will. Yeah. But you know what? Me and the other 11 dudes and Jason will still be doing masonry. So
I'll still be outside the darn door.
we'll be fine. We'll be fine. There will still be pockets of masonry.
You'll have your selection of Tyler swords at that point.
Oh,
I
yeah.
will.
Any Tyler sword you want from all the
Tyler's
closed lodges.
machete.
Nice. All right, gents. So, final thought for tonight's episode. Yeah. What do you think? I'm going to leave it open-ended, right? I did most of the talking tonight. Some good questions scattered about from you guys and from the chat. But what say you? Where do you think? Does this change anything? Does this make you hopeful, pessimistic, or somewhere in between?
Does it make me hopeful? No, because I don't think that, again, we're never going to get back to the 1920s or the 1950s masonry. It was a masonry for a different type of person, many of whom are really aging out of the craft very, very quickly. I think Brother Jose said it earlier when we're talking about, generations and how long they're around for and how much time they have left from a generational factor. I hate you so much. But no, I think that, like I said, I think that while the data that you have and the assumptions we've made from that data are sound, I think there will be a cultural change before we get to that zero point, because there's going to be people that are not going to allow it to die, whether that turns into, all those weird scenarios that you see on Facebook and other social media, our Grand Lodge is going to merge together, this kind of thing. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know there'll still be Masons. I will still know Masons. and there'll be people doing Masonry. It's just going to look a lot different than it has. And at the end of the day, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You know, I look forward to the change and I embrace change. And I think one of the biggest legacies that American continental Freemasonry is leaving, that they're going to have to learn to change. They've been resistant to change. They like the things the way they were 70, 80 years ago, and they don't want them to change. And it's all nostalgia. But math is going to force them to change. So I look forward to it. So I'm hopeful from the standpoint that, yeah, there'll still be Masonry. It'll just look a little bit different, but I'm going to stick along for the ride. So that's me. And I'll probably still be master. So,
Yeah.
So my excitement at having forecasted correctly, notwithstanding, right? So look at Grand Lodges that do more of a progressive type of line approach. You've got Grandmaster, Deputy Grandmaster, you know, Senior Junior Wardens, Senior Junior Deacons. That's, you know, 6 or so years at least of
Interesting. Yeah.
the same, you know, and I'm
Flavor.
speaking in generalizations,
Yeah.
the same flavor of Grand Lodge officer. Like that gives us, you know, at worst, you know, 4 years, at
Yeah.
best, you know, 9 or so.
So we got about 2-3 rotations of grand lines left. Yeah, from a leadership perspective, that's a really fascinating observation.
And so if the grand line is populated by a certain type of Grand Lodge officer who isn't looking kind of or paying attention to, you know, that bigger picture, and the grand line is grooming the next generation of grand line to run the same way, like there needs to be something big that happens in Grand Lodge leadership across the country, or it'll be too late.
There you go. Yeah, that's another way to think about it. And that, again, the iterations of Grand Lodges, Grand Lines, are even fewer. So, well said. So that's about it. This was fun to dig into the numbers again. Prove me wrong, brothers. Like, this is, you know, we have so much history and respect for the fraternity that we want it to turn around. Try new things, be optimistic. Like, this is not meant to be pessimistic. This is meant to be just the opposite, right? It's if I've kind of joked with like Jason in the past, like, hey, if there's that hypothetical question, like, if you could know the date and time of your death, would you want to know that? And many people say no. I'm saying sign me up. I want to be ready to go when that time comes. And this is it. Like, we're staring this in the face. If this is the death knell, the death toll of
rattle.
Freemasons.
Nell, you were right for a change.
Yeah, then let's prepare for it. Let's try what we can. Let's accept what we can't, and just hopefully go on this ride together for the next 15 years and see what happens. Alrighty. Well, with that, I want to thank every single one of you for watching, for listening, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.